Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya. Thank you, devotees from Los Angeles. Seattle devotees are excited and grateful for this wonderful opportunity. In this offering, we would like to present readings from Cherished Memories by Srimati Kanakammal, Shloka, and 12 Namas from Ramana Ashtottaram. Thank you. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya. It is all the same. As mentioned earlier, my parents were rather orthodox in their outlook. All my family members had great regard for the Paramacharya of Kanchi Mutt. Spiritual matters have always been given importance in my family. When at the age of 24 I decided to make Ramanashramam my permanent home, my relatives were upset. My mother was understandably worried about my physical comfort and security. But she was unable to do anything about it because I enjoyed my father's support and had his permission to stay at Ramanashramam and engage in spiritual practices. Because of their closeness to the Paramacharya of Kanchi, it is quite likely that my family informed him about my life. Someone or the other might even have requested him to intervene and use his influence to convince me to lead a normal life. I have visited the Kanchi Acharya on many occasions. Not even once has he criticized my chosen way of life. Not once did he ask me why I could not take up the duties of a married woman. Whenever I happened to visit him, the Paramacharya always raised his hand in benediction and gave me a smile and a look full of grace. I took this to mean that he approved of my way of life and that I had his blessings in full measure. My sister-in-law told me that every time she visited Paramacharya, he would ask her, "How is Ashram Kanaka?" My sister-in-law recounted this to me with obvious pride, and hearing about it made me very happy. Once, while on a visit to my grandmother in Kanchipuram, I was able to have darshan of Paramacharya every day. Soon, however, it was time for me to return to Ramanashramam. When my grandmother came to know that I was planning to leave soon, she was upset. She wanted me to stay with her for some more time. So she went to Paramacharya and requested him to convince me to stay on in Kanchipuram for some more time. Paramacharya listened to my grandmother patiently. Then, with a smile on his lips, he said, "How does it matter whether she is at Ramanashramam or here in Kanchipuram? It's all the same." Paramacharya's words were music to my ears. I was elated because he had openly endorsed my choice. I was moved to tears by this unexpected display of his grace. Paramacharya's eyes have an indescribable power. A glance of those eyes can electrify a person and thrill him to the very core of his being. No one can remain impervious to the captivating glance of those eyes. Once caught in that mesmerizing look, one loses all sense of individuality. The mind automatically turns inwards and one gets a feeling of utter peace. One loses all desire for anything else. All one wants is to stay forever in his presence, bathed in the endless shower of his grace.
God alone exists. Those who have realized the self, even when they are engaged in everyday activities, remain uninvolved. They are always in a state of utter stillness. Bhagavan himself has described this in the 30th verse of the supplement to reality in 40 verses. The mind that's devoid of attachments, though it may appear to be engaged in activity, is in reality inactive, just like the mind of a person listening to a story might wander off to a faraway place. Once we were all listening to the radio in the Jubilee Hall. At the end of the program, the names of all the artists were announced. Bhagavan said, "See, the radio sings and gives speeches. It even announces the names of the performers. But there is nobody inside the radio. Our existence is also like that. The body might appear to walk and talk and perform a number of functions. But in fact, there is no individual inside the body. Everything is God. He alone exists," Bhagavan continued. The concepts of time and space are also imaginary. When we listen to a concert on the radio, Are we bothered about the exact time and location at which the concert took place? What difference can it make to our enjoyment of the music? Whether the concert took place in Hyderabad or in Madras, we can listen to the music and derive the same degree of enjoyment sitting right here in this hall. The wise man does not attach any importance to concepts of space and time. One has to go through certain situations in a given lifetime, and for this a body is required. That is the only reason for acquiring a body. He goes through various experiences without getting involved in anything. To an ordinary person, worldly experiences seem real. An ordinary person might think that a liberated person has all the experiences that others have. But the liberated person has no attachment to the body, and therefore physical experiences hold no significance for him. The Jivan Mukta has the same attitude towards his body that a railway porter has for the luggage he carries. Just as the porter carries the luggage up to the stipulated spot and lays it down at that spot, the Jivan Mukta carries the body through the preordained experiences of a lifetime, and at the end of the course he lays down the burden with relief. The porter thinks of the load on his head only as a burden. He does not identify with it on a personal level. That's why he feels no regret when he puts it down. It's the same in the case of a Jivan Mukta. As he never thinks of the body as having any personal significance, he feels no sorrow when the time comes for him to leave the body. During the last days of Bhagavan's earthly life, when his devotees beseeched him to retain the human form for a long time, Bhagavan used to say, "A jnani, a realized soul, knows that the sole purpose of acquiring a body is to enable the spirit to attain knowledge through experiences. Do we feel sad because we have to throw away the used leaf plate after a meal? In the same way, a jnani discards the human body without any regret or sorrow."
The master who devours everything. One of the advantages we enjoyed was that we could benefit from Bhagavan's conversations with various people. Someone or the other would ask a question. Bhagavan's answers were always short and to the point. Yet Bhagavan's words seemed to be addressed directly and personally to every member in the gathering. Sometimes a devotee would have a doubt or a problem which he was reluctant to discuss in the presence of strangers. In such situations, somebody else would ask Bhagavan a question, and Bhagavan's reply would answer the reticent devotee's unasked question too. This is indeed the greatest miracle of all. Once a devotee of Vilakshanananda Swami visited Sri Ramana. He approached Bhagavan and timidly inquired, "Our Guru tells us to repeat the name of the Lord a fixed number of times every day and surrender to Him the spiritual merit thus acquired. What is the practice here?" Bhagavan laughed heartily at the cleverness of the Guru, who accumulated vast spiritual wealth without having to work for it. When Muruganar entered the hall, Bhagavan beckoned him and said, "Look, isn't this a marvelous idea? This person's Guru tells all his disciples to do Nama Japa so many times every day and collects the spiritual merit as is due. I wonder what the disciples get after this surrender. This is like paying out regular installments of interest on a loan, isn't it? How do you like the idea?" Muruganar replied, "Oh Bhagavan, their Guru is certainly far better than you. He only demands the interest, leaving the principle intact. But you swallow up everything, principle, interest and all. When the individual himself has disappeared, who is there to repay the loan? And anyway, the principal and the interest also get wiped out. Nothing at all remains." As he spoke, Muruganar's eyes filled with tears and his voice was choked with emotion. Bhagavan merely smiled and remained silent. What Muruganar meant was that Bhagavan wipes out the mind and the ego of the devotees. Once the mind has disappeared without trace, where is the instrument for doing japa or meditation? The mind is the principle, that has been loaned to us for this lifetime, and Namajapa is the interest to be paid on this principle. How can one pay the interest when the principle itself has disappeared? The destruction of the principle, the mind ego, is a matter for rejoicing. When Bhagavan confiscates the principle, that is, when his glance of grace destroys the mind, the fortunate devotee is forever free of his liabilities. He no longer has to worry about paying interest in the form of japa, etc. The destruction of the principle, therefore, brings great joy.
Vivekananda, I presume. Bhagavan's presence was a haven of peace. Bhagavan would be reclining upon the sofa in the meditation hall, and the devotees would be seated all around the sofa. For the most part, the entire gathering was perfectly silent. Only rarely did someone speak, for only rarely was the need for speech felt at all. Bhagavan and his disciples communed in vibrant silence which pervaded the meditation hall. Whenever Bhagavan's eyes fell upon us, he would feel electrified. All doubts would vanish and he would sink deep within ourselves. Our absorption in the self was always enhanced by Bhagavan's glance of grace. We were like the bees feeding upon the intoxicating nectar of Bhagavan's grace. Once in a while somebody would ask a question. Bhagavan seldom spoke, and even when he did, there was a great economy of words. In a few words, he would convey great meaning. One day, a young, well-educated man came to Bhagavan, prostrated and sat down. Somehow we got the impression that the youth was waiting for an opportunity to say something. The serene silence in the hall was soon broken by the young man's voice. He said to Bhagavan, "It is said that Ramakrishna Parahamsa was able to elevate Vivekananda to the state of Nirvikalpa Samadhi with just a touch. Can Bhagavan do the same for me?" Bhagavan did not say anything. The young man waited with obvious impatience for Bhagavan's reply. After a few minutes of silence, Bhagavan looked at the youth and in a soft voice asked, "You are another Vivekananda, I presume?" The young man was taken back. He was at loss for words. His discomfiture was obvious to everyone in the hall. Clearly incapable of hiding his embarrassment, the young man got up and left the hall without another word. After the young man had left the place, Bhagavan remarked to us, "Nobody appreciates the need for self-analysis and self-criticism. The general tendency is to think of oneself as perfect and to look for opportunities to cast aspersions on the nature of all other people. The boy had no time to examine his own nature. All he could see was this sadhu reclining on a sofa surrounded by a group of reverend disciples. He wanted to see whether I was really worthy of all this reverence, so he took it upon himself to challenge me. Though he was eager to see whether I had the power of Sri Ramakrishna, he was not bothered about whether he himself merited comparison with Vivekananda. This is because he assumed that he himself was perfect. If he had paused to think about his own worthiness, he would have never asked such a question. Sri Ramakrishna bestowed that rare state upon Vivekananda alone because Vivekananda was a person of rare spiritual merit. To one who is engaged in self-inquiry, all other questions become irrelevant and unimportant.
The Golden Parrot. Sri Matrabhuteshwara Temple was nearing completion. All the preparations for the consecration ceremony were going on at full speed. The temple was being given finishing touches and materials were being gathered for the various homams and other religious ceremonies. To coordinate the various activities connected with the consecration ceremony, a committee was formed. Professor T.K. Duraiswami Iyer was one of the members of this committee. He discharged his duties with great sincerity and devotion. Duraiswami Iyer and his wife Yogambal were regular visitors to the ashram. They had rented a house in Tiruvannamalai town and they came to the ashram every morning and evening and spent a lot of time in meditation in Bhagavan's presence. Yogambal was a devotee of the mother goddess. She would often invite Bhagavan's devotees to her house and talk to them about their experiences in Bhagavan's presence. She was a very generous lady and she never hesitated to help those in need. Their house was always full of guests. Yogambal had one fond wish. She wanted to have a small golden parrot made and place it in the hand of the goddess in the Matrabhuteshwara temple. So, Duraiswami Iyer commissioned a jeweler to make a golden parrot of a suitable size. The golden parrot was made and delivered to Duraiswami Iyer in due time. That evening, when the couple made their customary visit to the ashram, Yogambal had the golden figure in her hand. After prostrating to Bhagavan, she gave the golden parrot to Bhagavan and said, "This parrot has been made with the idea of placing it in the goddess' hand." Bhagavan took the small figure in his hand and turning it this way and that, admired the delicate craftsmanship. Bhagavan then smiled at the couple and said, "This is a parrot suitable for the goddess to hold in her hand." What a wonderful coincidence! The one who is offering the parrot is Yogambal, and the one who is receiving it is Yogambal too. The deity in the Matrubhuteshwara temple is named Yogambal. By remarking upon this coincidence, the lady was moved to tears.
Realization through music. Sri Bhagavan was like the mythical Kalpavriksha, wish-fulfilling tree. The devotee's slightest wish, even the unspoken ones, would be fulfilled by merely coming into Bhagavan's presence. Once, a lady from Andhra Pradesh had come to the ashram. She was well versed in music and played the veena very well. She often visited the ashram and would sometimes render a few songs, either vocally or on the veena. This lady had a doubt and she was waiting for the right opportunity to speak to Bhagavan about it. One morning, when there was not much of a crowd in the hall, the lady approached Bhagavan and asked, "Bhagavan, is it possible to attain moksha, liberation through music alone, or would other spiritual practices be required?" Bhagavan did not say anything at all. Unable to interpret Bhagavan's silence, the lady pursued the matter, saying, "Did not Saint Tyagaraja and others gain moksha through singing the praises of the Lord?" Bhagavan smiled and said, "Saint Tyagaraja and others did not attain realization through the songs that they sang. Rather, their songs are the expression of the ecstasy within, the result of the realization of the ultimate, and that is the reason why their songs have survived the test of the time. This is what is called Nadopanishad." The lady was astonished by the simple yet unambiguous way in which Bhagavan had elucidated this great truth. She prostrated to Bhagavan and said, "Your words have cleared all my doubts, Bhagavan. I realize now that I had been fooling myself all these days with my half-baked ideas and mistaken beliefs. Bhagavan's grace has opened my eyes and shown me the truth. Now my mind is clear and free. Om Namo Bhagavan Ramanaya."
नागेन्द्रहाराय त्रिलोचनाय भस्माङ्गरागाय महेश्वराय नागेन्द्रहाराय त्रिलोचनाय भस्माङ्गरागाय महेश्वराय नित्याय शुद्धाय दिगम्बराय तस्मै नकाराय नमः शिवाय नित्याय शुद्धाय दिगम्बराय तस्मै नकाराय नमः शिवाय नमः शिवाय नमः शिवाय नमः शिवाय नमः शिवाय मन्दाकिनी सलिल चन्दनचर्चिताय नन्दीश्वर प्रमथनाथ महेश्वराय मन्दाकिनी सलिलचन्दनचर्चिताय नन्दीश्वर प्रमथनाथ महेश्वराय मन्दारपुष्प बहुपुष्प सुपूजिताय तस्मै मकाराय नमः शिवाय मन्दारपुष्प बहुपुष्प सुपूजिताय तस्मै मकाराय नमः शिवाय नमः शिवाय नमः शिवाय नमः शिवाय नमः शिवाय शिवाय गौरीवदनाब्जवृन्द सूर्याय दक्षध्वरनाशकाय शिवाय गौरीवदनाब्जवृन्द सूर्याय दक्षवरनाशकाय श्रीनीलकण्ठाय वृषध्वजाय तस्मै शिकाराय नमः शिवाय श्रीनीलकण्ठाय वृषध्वजाय तस्मै शिकाराय नमः शिवाय नमः शिवाय नमः शिवाय नमः शिवाय नमः शिवाय वसिष्ठकुम्भोद्भवगौतमार्य मुनीन्द्रदेवार्चितशेखराय वसिष्ठकुम्भोद्भवगौतमार्य मुनीन्द्रदेवार्चितशेखराय चन्द्रार्कवैश्वानरलोचनाय तस्मै वकाराय नमः शिवाय चन्द्रार्कवैश्वानरलोचनाय तस्मै वकाराय नमः शिवाय नमः शिवाय नमः शिवाय नमः शिवाय नमः शिवाय यक्षस्वरूपाय जटाधराय पिनाकहस्ताय सनातनाय यक्षस्वरूपाय जटाधराय पिनाकहस्ताय सनातनाय दिव्याय देवाय दिगम्बराय तस्मै यकाराय नमः शिवाय दिव्याय देवाय दिगम्बराय तस्मै यकाराय नमः शिवाय नमः शिवाय नमः शिवाय नमः शिवाय नमः शिवाय पञ्चाक्षरमिदं पुण्यं य पठेत् शिवसन्निधौ शिवलोकमवाप्नोति शिवेन सह मोदते।
Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya. Vishwanatha Swami. Sri Vishwanatha Swami attained Mahasamadhi on Monday, the 22nd October 1979. In a conventional sense, he attained the holy feet of Sri Ramana. Yet, in reality, there was no question of his being reunited with Sri Ramana because he was never separated from him, having lived wholly in Ramana. Readers of the Mountain Path, a quarterly published by Sri Ramanashramam, of which he was the editor for a few years, would have had a glimpse of his spiritual stature from the editorials and the articles written by him in it. His masterly knowledge of Tamil is evident from his translation of talks of Sri Bhagavan, Bhagavat Vachanamritam, and the depth of his Sanskrit learning can be seen from his Ashtotara on Sri Bhagavan. Because of his simplicity, humility, and retiring temperament, many have not had the good fortune of being fully aware about his great life. What marked him out was his total love for Sri Bhagavan and his great consideration for Bhagavan's devotees. Early in 1979, his health started failing. Yet, he would never accept the services of the devotees only because he did not wish to trouble them even to the slightest extent. His room, which was next to the Ramanashram dispensary, was virtually a vibrant meditation center since many liked to do dhyana in his potent presence. If some disturbance was there outside, he would not hesitate to mildly reprimand the persons concerned and to request them to be silent out of consideration for the fellow devotees in dhyana. Sometimes, when in the mood, he would regale the listeners with incidents and stories relating to Sri Bhagavan, Ganpati Muni, and Muruganar, drawing on his long association of nearly 3 decades with Sri Bhagavan. The Ramana Maharshi Center for Learning, Bangalore, is bringing out in his honor the book of worship on Sri Bhagavan composed by this great Swami as also an English translation of his Tamil commentary. We are certain that in so honoring him, we will be voicing the feelings of thousands of devotees of Sri Ramana all over the world, in whose minds and hearts his memory is cherished.
Mahasena Mahomshena Jataha. Born of the effulgence of Mahasena. Mahasena is the title conferred on the youngest son of Shiva, since he was the victorious commander-in-chief of the celestial army against demonical forces. The worship begins with this name because, as mentioned in the foreword, Ramana is regarded as his incarnation. He heads the forces which destroy the innate tendencies that externalize the mind. By his grace, the mind turns inward. Om Mahasena Mahomshena Jataya Namaha.
Sri Ramanaha, Sri Ramana. This was the name given to him by Ganapati Muni. He is known throughout the world by this name, which is the heart's delight of devotees. Not only is he always reveling in the self, but he is also helping others to attain the state of bliss. The power of this name for pulling one within to the heart and its glory cannot be adequately described. Om Shri Ramanaya Namaha.
Guruhu, destroyer of ignorance. The importance of the Guru as the bestower of knowledge is proclaimed in the Guru Gita, in the Tantras and the Agamas. The one who is firmly rooted in the self and who can also give that state to the disciple alone is the true Guru. A Sadguru like this is rare. Such a Guru's magnetic influence will wean one away from sensate attractions. Only such a Guru deserves to be followed and worshipped. Others are only Gurus in name. There are lamps in every house. Ordinary Gurus can be compared to such lamps, whereas the Sadguru is like the sun which provides light to the whole world. There are many erudite scholars of the Vedas and Vedanta, but since they do not have any experience, they can at best explain the meaning of the words. The Sadguru, on the other hand, leads the disciples onto the experiencing of inherent bliss. All the virtues of a Sadguru which are described in the scriptures are found in full measure in Ramana.
Om Gurave Namaha.
Akanda Samvitakaraha, immersed in the fullness of consciousness. The division between the seer and the seen is fragmentary knowledge. Ramana has expounded the truth that the search within for the seer would merge one in the limitless consciousness where all the differences cease. Ramana is the embodiment of that oneness. Om Akanda Samvidakaraya Namaha.
Mahojaha, great light of grace. Ramana is that complete consciousness because of which everything else shines.
Karanodbhavaha, born for a specific purpose. Ordinarily, birth has a karmic cause. Ramana's birth, however, was only for the welfare of the world. There was no karmic cause because he was born with the constant thought of Arunachala. In this context, there is a verse in Tirupugar which is apt. The verse, when translated into English, would read, Lord, come as the living embodiment of eternal life, untouched by death. The purpose of your advent is to show the way to liberation. Om Karanodbhavaya Namaha.
Jagat Hitavataraha, born for the welfare of the world. When dharma wanes and evil reigns, you appear to vanquish evil. Restore dharma and give strength to the virtuous and renew earth's life. Who are we, after all, to know in what elusive form you come to save the world? Ramana has composed this verse in some other context about avatars. This verse would apply equally to him, for who can say why he assumed the human form? Om Jagat Hitavatārāya Namaha.
Shri Bhuminatha Sthalottitaha. Born in the sacred place of Bhuminatha. Shiva is called Bhuminatha in the temple at Tiruchili. Saivate saints have sung the glory of Bhuminatha. Tiruchili has become doubly sanctified since it is Ramana's birthplace.
Om Shri Bhuminatha Sthalottitaya Namaha.
Parashara Kulottamsaha, crest jewel of the lineage of Parasara. Ramana was born with the consciousness of the glory of Arunachala, the Tejolinga. He sought it single-mindedly and lost his identity in it. He composed many verses on its uniqueness. Likewise, Ramana Maharshi, the progenitor of Ramana line, has composed many Sanskrit verses, pregnant with meaning, for the worship of the Supreme as Agni, the great light.
Om Parashara Kulottamsaya Namaha.
Sundararya Tapaphalam, the fruit of the penance of the noble Sundaram. Sundaram Iyer was fortune's greatest favorite since he was the father of such a one as Bhagavan. Noted for his generous nature and compassion, he and his like-minded wife Alagammal were well known for their hospitality. What rare penance should he have performed to be the father of the unique sage Ramana?
Om Sundaraya Tapaphalaya Namaha. Kamaniya Sucharitraha, the story of whose life captures the heart. The golden hue of Ramana's body, his lustrous eyes, the charm of his talk, and his smiling face captured the hearts of everyone who saw him. Hence, even as a baby, Ramana was taken by the neighbors eagerly to their houses and fondled. Thus, from infancy, he became one who belonged to everyone. Om Kamaniya Sucharitraya Namaha.
Sahayamba Sahayavan, one who was blessed by Sahayamba, Tunaimalai Amman in Tamil. When someone scolded him as a boy, Raman ran immediately to the temple of Sahayamba and poured out his grief. His sorrow was not only assuaged, but he was also filled with bliss. Thus, at a young age, Ramana was the recipient of the grace of the Divine Mother. Om Sahayamba Sahayavate Namaha.
Thank you, devotees. Now we'd like to invite devotees from Tennessee to continue the celebrations. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya.